First story. Trapped in a cursed school. It was a cold and rainy night when Lucas, a dedicated high school student, stayed late at school to finish a science project. He was so focused on his work that he lost track of time. When he finally lifted his head, he realized the school was deserted, and the hallway lights were off. Lucas quickly tried to leave, but when he reached the main door, he found it locked. He tried other exits, but they were all locked as well. Panic began to set in as Lucas wandered through the dark hallways, looking for a way out. As he walked down the second-floor hallway, he heard a strange noise coming from the chemistry lab. Curiosity got the better of him, and he approached the door. When he opened it, he saw something he would never forget. In the center of the lab stood a shadowy figure with glowing eyes and a sinister smile, mixing substances in flasks that emitted thick, greenish smoke. Lucas froze in fear, unable to move or scream. The figure slowly turned to him, and its piercing eyes seemed to look straight into his soul. "You shouldn't be here," the figure whispered in a voice that echoed throughout the entire lab. Without thinking twice, Lucas turned and ran, but the hallways he once knew so well now seemed like an endless maze. He entered the library, hoping to find a place to hide. However, the books on the shelves started to fall as if an invisible force was knocking them over. Lucas's panic grew as he heard heavy footsteps approaching. He ran to the music room and hid in a closet. Outside, he heard the shadowy figure scratching the door and whispering his name. Lucas closed his eyes and prayed it was just a nightmare. Hours seemed to pass before the noise finally stopped. When Lucas opened his eyes, the room was silent. He cautiously stepped out of the closet and, looking out the window, saw that the sun was beginning to rise. With his heart still pounding, he tried the music room door, and to his surprise, it was unlocked. Lucas ran through the now sunlit hallways to the main exit, which was also open. When he got home, exhausted and scared, he told his parents the story, but no one believed him. They thought it was just his imagination running wild due to exhaustion. However, Lucas knew what he saw that night was real. And he never stayed late at school again. A few months later, the school was closed for renovations. During the work, the laborers found an old diary belonging to a janitor who had mysteriously disappeared years earlier. In the diary, he described a similar experience to Lucas's, mentioning a shadowy figure wandering the hallways at night. Since then, the legend of the Night Watcher became part of the local folklore, and students always made sure to leave the school before nightfall, fearing an encounter with the shadowy figure that lurked in the dark corridors. Second story, the Halloween Blood Mary. It was a chilly October night, and the school was adorned with spooky decorations for the much-anticipated Halloween dance. All the students were excited, dressed in elaborate costumes, and enjoying the festive atmosphere. Lights flickered, loud music echoed through the hallways, and laughter filled the air. Among the group of friends were Anna, Clara, and Julia. They decided to go to the bathroom together before the dance started, laughing and chatting about their costumes and the boys they hoped to see. In the bathroom, amid their giggles and lively conversation, Anna suggested a game she had heard about, summoning Bloody Mary. It was just an innocent prank, something to add a bit more thrill to the night. "Come on, girls. It's just a silly story. Nothing's going to happen," Anna said, laughing as she stood in front of the mirror. Clara and Julia hesitated but eventually agreed. The three of them stood in front of the mirror, turned off the lights, and in unison, began to chant, "Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary." Nothing happened. They laughed nervously, turned the lights back on, and returned to the dance, convinced it was just an urban legend. The party continued with its lively atmosphere, but one by one, the friends began to drift away. Anna was the first to leave the dance floor, heading to the bathroom to touch up her makeup. As she looked in the mirror, something strange began to happen. The reflection in the mirror seemed distorted, and a shadowy figure appeared behind her. Anna didn't have time to scream before she felt a cold, cruel presence pulling her into the mirror. She vanished without a trace. Clara, noticing Anna's absence, decided to leave the party to look for her. She found a dark, empty corridor, perfect for sneaking away from the party for a moment to smoke a cigarette. As she smoked, a sense of dread began to creep over her. A dark mist approached, and from within it emerged the figure of Bloody Mary. Clara tried to run, but she was quickly grabbed and dragged into the darkness, her screams muffled by the loud party music. Julia, unaware of what had happened to her friends, decided to spend some time with her boyfriend. They found a dark, empty room, away from the hustle and bustle of the party. Between kisses and laughter, the atmosphere began to change. Julia felt a chill run down her spine and, looking around, saw a shadow move. Before she could react, the door slammed shut with force, and Bloody Mary appeared, approaching with a malevolent smile. Julia tried to back away, but the shadowy figure grabbed her, disappearing with her into the darkness. The party continued, and the students didn't notice the absence of the three friends until much later. When they finally realized Anna, Clara, and Julia were missing, a search began. Teachers and students scoured every corner of the school but found no sign of them. The events of that night became a legend at the school. Some said it was just a coincidence, but those who knew about the Bloody Mary summoning knew the truth. The bathroom where it all began was permanently locked, and no one dared to play with the name of Bloody Mary again. The school remained haunted by that night, and the hallways that were once filled with laughter and chatter now held a somber silence, reminding everyone of the dangers of innocent pranks that can awaken forces beyond human understanding. Third story, the Forbidden Room. Ridgewood High School had always carried an air of mystery. Founded in 1923, the school bore nearly a century of stories and legends. Among the students and teachers, one story stood out, the legend of Room 13. Room 13 was located in the old science building, which had been closed off and locked for many years. No one knew exactly what had happened there, but rumors whispered of a tragic and violent event that had occurred decades ago. Since then, the room had been sealed and abandoned. A group of seniors, Emily, Mike, Sarah, and Jack, were determined to uncover the truth about Room 13. Driven by curiosity and a desire for one last great adventure before graduation, they planned to explore the room over the weekend when the school would be deserted. On a chilly Friday night, the four friends managed to sneak into the school unnoticed. Armed with flashlights and cameras, they made their way to the old science building. The door to the building was rusted and hard to open, but with some effort, they managed to get inside. The hallways were dark and dusty, creating an oppressive and eerie atmosphere. Finally, they reached the door of Room 13. The hinges creaked as the door slowly swung open. The room was exactly as it had been left years ago, dusty desks, a chalkboard covered in cobwebs, and abandoned books scattered on the floor. In the center of the room, there was a circle drawn on the floor with strange symbols that none of them recognized. Emily, always the bravest, approached the circle and touched one of the symbols. A sudden chill ran through her body, and the flashlights began to flicker. Suddenly, the door to the room slammed shut with a loud bang, trapping the four friends inside. The air grew cold, and a mist began to form within the room. Whispering voices echoed off the walls, and shadowy figures appeared in the corners of the room. A figure of a young girl materialized in the middle of the circle. She appeared to be in pain and agony, her face twisted in a silent scream. The friends huddled together, terrified. Sarah, the most empathetic of the group, stepped forward. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. The girl's ghostly form seemed to solidify slightly, and she began to speak in a soft, haunting voice. "My name is Lily. I was a student here many years ago. Something terrible happened in this room." As Lily spoke, the room seemed to transform around them. They were no longer in the present day but transported back to the 1950s. The room was filled with students, and a young girl stood in the center of the circle, reciting an incantation. It was Lily. Her classmates watched with a mix of fear and fascination. Lily continued, "We were trying to contact the spirit world. But something went wrong. We summoned something evil." The scene changed again. The students in the room began to scream as a dark, malevolent presence filled the space. Desks and chairs were thrown across the room by an invisible force, and one by one, the students were struck down. Lily's spirit was trapped, forced to relive the horror of that night over and over again. Back in the present, Emily, Mike, Sarah, and Jack stood frozen in fear. Lily's spirit looked at them with pleading eyes. "You must help me. Break the circle. Free me from this torment." Determined to help, Jack stepped forward and began to scrub the symbols off the floor with his sleeve. As he did, the temperature in the room began to rise, and the mist started to dissipate. The shadowy figures retreated, and the whispering voices grew quieter. With the last symbol erased, a bright light filled the room. Lily's spirit smiled, a look of peace washing over her face. "Thank you," she whispered before fading away completely. The door to room 13 creaked open, and the four friends hurried out, hearts pounding. They knew they had experienced something extraordinary and terrifying, but they had also done something good. Room 13 remained sealed, but the legend of the haunted classroom took on a new chapter. Emily, Mike, Sarah, and Jack never spoke of that night again, but they carried the memory with them forever, knowing they had helped a lost soul find peace. Fourth story, The Macabre Janitor. Zachy and John were best friends, always on the lookout for adventure and mystery. Ridgewood High School, with its old buildings and hidden corners, was the perfect playground for their curiosity. Lately, they had heard strange rumors about the school janitor, Mr. Harper. Whispers among the students claimed he was involved in dark rituals in the school's basement. Intrigued and slightly skeptical, Zachy and John decided to investigate one Friday night. They stayed late after school, hiding in the shadows until the building was empty. When the halls were finally silent, they made their way to the basement door. The old, creaky door was slightly ajar, and they could hear faint chanting coming from below. Heart pounding, Zaki pushed the door open, and they descended the narrow stairs. The basement was dimly lit by candles, and in the center of the room, Mr. Harper stood in front of an altar, surrounded by strange symbols and artifacts. He was deeply engrossed in his ritual, chanting in a language neither of the boys recognized. Suddenly, Mr. Harper stopped and turned to face the boys, a sinister smile spreading across his face. "I've been expecting you," he said, his voice echoing off the cold, stone walls. With a swift motion, he slammed the door shut and locked it, trapping Zaki and John inside. Before they could react, Mr. Harper lunged at them, managing to knock them unconscious with a chloroform-soaked rag. When they woke up, they found themselves tied to chairs, positioned in the middle of the ritual circle. "Welcome to my ceremony," Mr. Harper sneered, holding a gleaming knife in his hand. "You two are going to be the highlight of tonight's ritual." As Mr. Harper raised the knife, ready to strike, a loud crash echoed through the basement. Tony, their big and burly friend who had secretly followed them, burst into the room. With a piece of a broken chair, he swung hard, hitting Mr. Harper on the head. The janitor crumpled to the ground, unconscious. "Are you guys okay?" Tony asked, panting as he hurried to untie his friends. Zaki and John, still in shock, nodded and helped Tony drag Mr. Harper out of the circle. "We need to get to the principal. She has to know about this," John urged. The three boys ran out of the basement, leaving the dimly lit horror behind. They burst into Principal Evans' office, breathless and frantic. "We found Mr. Harper doing some sort of ritual in the basement," Zaki exclaimed. Principal Evans looked at them with a mix of confusion and concern. "Mr. Harper?" "Boys, Mr. Harper died last year in a car accident." The room fell silent. The boys stared at Principal Evans, their minds struggling to comprehend what she had just said. But he was just in the basement," Tony stammered. Principal Evans sighed and led them back to the basement. When they arrived, the room was empty, devoid of any signs of the ritual they had witnessed. The candles were gone, the symbols erased, and the altar missing. Sometimes, our minds play tricks on us, especially in a place with as much history as this school, Principal Evans said gently. "It's late. You boys should go home and get some rest." As they left the school, the boys couldn't shake the feeling of unease. They knew what they had seen and experienced was real. The figure of Mr. Harper, whether ghost or something else, had left an indelible mark on their memories. Years later, as they recounted the story to friends and family, the tale of the sinister janitor in the nightmarish basement would always end with the same chilling realization: sometimes, the dead don't stay dead.